All right, folks, we're going to be working on the Module 1 lab. The lab's broken into two pieces here. There's Lab A and a Lab B. And since this is our first one, I'm going to do a little explaining on how these are kind of put together. First of all, there'll be a description of what we're trying to do. And we're also going to be looking at what the output should look like. So we're given an example of what target we're shooting for, right? Or how the program will look when it operates. So the first lab says write a program that takes two numbers as input. It should print the sum, the difference, the product, right? And it explains what all those are. And the program should then ask for a width and height and print the area. And then here's a sample program run. So this is our goal for what we're building first. Now, what I'm going to do back here over in Visual Studio is we had this like program we were kind of messing around with here, and I did call it Mod 1 Lecture. It's just a demo thing. So I'm going to close this, and I'm going to do that by coming up to the File menu, and I'm going to choose Close Solution, right? Your intuition is to hit Close, but that just closes the file. It doesn't close the project, and we want to really close the project down. So I'm going to do Close Solution. Then I'm going to create a new project. We already have the console app by now as one of the recent templates. So just go ahead and click that. Let's name it something appropriate. Notice I'm putting it in my Intro to Programming WCTC folder, 2024 Fall Module 1, right? You guys probably wouldn't have the fall in there, but whatever. And then I'm going to call it Mod 1 Lab. And there's two labs in here. Normally, when the programs get a little more complex and you have like an A lab and a B lab, they probably should be separate files, but these are both pretty short. So if you want, you can do them in the same file, right? So I'm just going to say Mod 1 Lab. All right. I'm going to say yes to that, hit create, and we are all set to code. And I'm going to begin by removing all the code that's already there, right? The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of, I am going to put this up here. So Mod 1 Lab A, just to kind of signify for my own sake that this is different than Lab B, basically. All right. So instructions, we need instructions. The instructions say, write a program that takes two numbers as input. All right. Let's just handle that. Now we're going to take in two numbers, correct? And we're going to do something with those numbers. Could we set up variables to hold those numbers first? And that's where I would recommend that you start. So I'm going to create an int. And let's see, what should I call this? I will call this, oh, this is what I called it last time. And I don't want to do that. I'm going to, you know what? I'm going to go with it. Sometimes I change my mind, sometimes I don't. I'm going to create two integers, 1 and 2. Okay. Not initializing them yet. Right. The next thing I'm going to do is prompt the user, right? So, and I'll have you notice, right? You could consider this input, right? The user is going to be giving us the input. So what I'm going to do is I'll type the first one out manually. So I'll say console.write, right? And I'm only using write here because I do want it to stay on the same line. And then I'm going to prompt them and say input first number. And if you want to be really precise about this, because I get people that get pretty persnickety about it. All right, here's a sample run, but they're using a colon here. So if you want to use a colon, you can use a colon. If you want to use some other fancy prompting mechanism, you know what? I'll go with the colon. Put a semicolon at the end. Don't forget that. And then we're going to store that value in the one variable. And we're going to do a convert, if you guys remember, to int32. And I'm taking the auto suggestion from Visual Studio. Did you guys see how I did that? It kind of filled it in automatically. And I'm like, yep, that's mostly right. It's not completely right, by the way. Right. So the part I'm going to fix is this should be console.readline. And there should be a set of parentheses in there too, like that. So that's capturing the first piece of information. And I'm going to show you what this is doing, which is just insanely powerful. I'm not typing this, folks. That next line of code is the line that we will eventually type. And I'm really tempted to like not accept the suggestion, you know. And I know that it's probably like, okay, well, he's showing us how to cheat. No, I'm not showing you how to cheat. Like, so some people might be using Writer instead, or some people might be using Visual Studio Code, where the IntelliSense is not nearly this powerful. But this is like insanely powerful, right? So since it kind of wrote the code for me, I don't think there's anything wrong with taking that, by the way. But we want to change the prompt here to do this. I mean, ultimately, it's just text anyhow, right? So enter the first number, convert it, save it. Enter the second number, convert it, save it. That's what we did there. Okay. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're kind of going to do the processing and the output at the same time. So I'm going to kind of mark that here. And I sometimes do this and sometimes and output. Combined. All right. So I'm going to show you 3 different ways to output the solution. Right. So here's the one way. And I know you guys are probably hurriedly typing this in. So this is the first way that we saw, where we take the variables, use plus signs, and then whatever we want, you know, with spaces or equal signs or whatever, we type that in as text, and then we can force the math to happen inside of parentheses and output it. So that's one way. All right. The other way that we can do this is with string interpolation, right? So string interpolation, we saw one method in the PowerPoint. So I'm just going to drop this in, right? Which was where we add the $sign, and then we insert the variable names inside of curly brackets inside the statement, inside 2 double quotes. And then the variables drop into those spots. And, you know, I guess, you know, this is kind of weird, but what do we demonstrate? This is multiplication, right? That's the third approach, right? And here, if you want to mark it, you could say addition. This one's multiplication. There's yet another approach, and I'm going to show you this one. It's a variation on the string interpolation. I tend not to use this quite so much, but this is a little more Python-like, in that you don't use the $sign. You put your statement together, and then these are put here in order of their index value. This is 0, this is 1, this is 2. That's kind of a weird one. So that's subtraction. So I'm showing you all 3. All of them work just fine, right? There's some advantages to, you know, the one thing I can say, what's nice about this is the statement becomes really concise, right? It looks better. But I still tend to like this one better. This is just me. So these are 3 different ways to concatenate. whatever you feel speaks to you most, go with it. What I tend to see from my students and from a lot of professional programmers these days is, put little like stars here. That's the one people like for the most part. It is a really modern approach, by the way. All right. Now we have the second task, right? And actually it was task 1, right? And now we're going to do task 2, which is area, right? So task 1 was basic math, area calculation. That's what we're going to do next. Now, all right, let's look at the instructions again. So we did this, right? Sum, difference, and product. The program should then ask for a width and height and print the area. Okay. Now, what I could do, right, is I could create new variables, right? But I could use the same ones. I could, right? So this time I could prompt. So I might prompt maybe like this. Maybe I use 2 arrows. Input with. Of course, we're going to read that in and convert it. Well, we already did that. Could I reuse the same variable? Sure, why not? We already did our calculations before. Do we need to occupy more memory? Not really. Right. These are decisions you make as a coder all the time, by the way. So there's the width. And then here's the statement to grab the height. And I'm pasting it in, folks, in the interest of time efficiency. And just remember, if I'm going too fast, you can always rewind the video tomorrow or whatever. So I'm prompting for the width, I'm prompting for the height, and converting. Now we're left to do the output again, right? And so I'm going to do it with straight up string interpolation, which is like this, using the $sign, 2 quotes, and then I'm putting the calculation right in there inside the curly brackets. All right. We have not tested anything yet, have we? All right, so that's probably a mistake on my part to not have tested the first part on its own. I'm going to zoom out just ever so slightly so you can see it all. Right, so there it is. Right, I'm going to go ahead and do a run on this. I'll get the console out of the way once it pops up. All right, input the first number, 2, 3. Okay, 2 plus 3 is 5. 2 minus 3 minus 1. 2 times 3, 6. All good. Input the width. Let's go 10. Input the height. 5 is the area 50. Yes, indeed. Sure is. All right. So does our output look like the sample run? Really close, except I used, pointers here instead. And I didn't, well, yeah, I guess really, really close, right? And if you want, you could always try the numbers that are in the sample run because they should be correct calculations. So that's part A of the lab. Okay. Let's go ahead and do part B. And you know what? We better read the instructions, I guess, right? Here comes the instructions. Write a program that asks the user how many cupcakes they want to make. The output should be a list of ingredients based on the following recipe, with the amounts of the ingredients adjusted for the requested number of cupcakes. A simple cheese cupcake recipe has the following ingredients and makes 8 cupcakes. 4 eggs, 1 sugar, 3 cream cheese, and 1 teaspoon vanilla. Sample program run, right? So we're going to prompt the user for how many cupcakes. And then oh, I see. We're going to modify the recipe. So that recipe makes 8, but what if I only want 4? Right. So then we're going to have to do a little math to figure it out. See, this is the challenge here. The unfortunate thing I always tell people is coding. I'm sorry, but it takes math. It does. Right. Fortunately, this is simple math, and I'm not going to leave you high and dry, but a lot of times you can figure out these formulas pretty easily. And I think I mentioned that last time too. All right, let's go ahead and start coding this. I'm going to jump back over. Let's go ahead and terminate that program run. And let's get back into Visual Studio here. And let's start with a prompt. So we'll do the prompt. How many cupcakes would you like to make? And then instead of having a pre-declared variable, I'm going to declare the variable on the fly here, right? So I'm just going to call it cupcakes as an integer. I'm going to do the convert to with the console read line. I'm just accepting it, pressing tab. That is correct. We're converting that to it. All right. Now, to do the calculation, and without getting into like the theory of the calculation and like creating flowcharts and pseudocode and everything, which is probably something you should do, I'm going to just kind of give you the formula here. And that is basically how many cupcakes do we get as a ratio relative to how many one batch makes. So one batch makes 8. And depending on the number that we get, hear from the user, oh, I just want 1, I want 3. I'm not really sure, but we're setting up a ratio so that we can do other calculations, right? So this is kind of one of the tricks to the formula. All right, so now we're going to do the next line of output. And what does that look like? Modified recipe for 4 cupcakes. All right, so let's get that right line in there. So this is going to be a simple one. Right. So modified recipe for cupcakes. And notice the string interpolation technique on this. Right. So cupcakes here, inserts here. Trying to mix up the styles basically. And I'm going to use this technique for the majority of this one, or for the rest of it, as it seems. So now it's just a matter of like, I have to put out how many eggs, sugar, cream cheese, and vanilla. That's my goal. So I'll just do these one at a time. So I will do first the eggs. Then sugar. Cream cheese. And the vanilla. All right. Can I ask you guys, do you think that you'd be able to figure out this formula or these formulas on your own? Or would you have to sit there and think about it for like a half hour or something?
I probably would, me myself, I probably would think about it for a little bit, then I'll get it.
Yeah, you know what? And I think that's what most normal people would have to do. And real frankly, right, this is like going back to that like silly analogy of like building a house and running down to Menards and buying 2x4s and getting busy, right? It's better to have a plan first, and it might take a little paper and pencil, or you could probably Google it, right? You could probably ask Google, hey, is there a recipe converter, somewhere? And then they would basically show you the formulas, on how to do it. So it's not really that bad, right? So that's the remainder. Now, when I run this, I'm going to go ahead and get right to the run here. All right, so it's asking me to do all the other program stuff. So I'm going to put in some numbers, right? Do a width, do a height, Notice I use much larger numbers this time. So how many cupcakes would I like to make? Well, I'm going to use the number that they gave, which was 4. And so the modified recipe, does this make sense? It's half as much. So it's only 2 eggs, half cup sugar, 1.5 cream cheese, and half a teaspoon vanilla. So is that correct? Yeah, it looks like that's correct. All right. So that's our working program. Now, normally when I teach my coding class at Gateway, what I often do is I have people take screenshots of their code and their output, kind of like you get your screen the way I have mine. And so if you guys are game to doing this, that's pretty simple in Windows. You just bring up your snipping tool. That puts up this little panel, right? I click new, changes to a crosshairs, and I can just come in here. This isn't the best view because I'm not capturing all the code, but here is all the code and the output. And maybe the smarter way to do this would be like capture the code in one screenshot, and then you can do something silly. And this seems silly, but this is actually a very effective way for me to grade. You just basically take it from that snipping tool, and I apologize for bouncing so much. Hit the copy, paste it into a document, right? And then you can do, for example, a screenshot also of the output, like so. Copy that, paste it into Word, and this is kind of an easy way for me to grade. I would ask though that you do follow the instructions as well here. So once once this is complete, what you will do is you will submit this, and see, I don't have a submit button, but it tells you all the different stuff that you're, ideally you would have figured all this out, but I just gave you the answers. So when you do the submit on this, what I would like to see is the program.cs file. I don't need to get the whole program structure, so you can upload that. And then the Word document that shows the screenshots, that's also helpful. So normally what I do is I'll open up the screenshots and look at those. And if anything looks weird or off or whatever, then I open up the code file and run it. That's how I do it, right? Now think about this. If your code has problems, you're going to have all sorts of like red underlines and highlights and stuff. So it's going to clue me in to look, right? Now, if you do get truly stuck on an assignment, keep in mind that you should still turn it in, even if it's not completely working, because I'd rather have something to grade than nothing, and then I can help you with it. And if you're really that kind of stuck, you should probably be reaching out, and then I can help you fix things. So for example, this work is not due, I think, not until Monday, I think, if I'm not mistaken. So you still have days to work on it and experiment with it and make it better and clean it up and do whatever you want. But at least we have the majority of it complete. All right. So this is that first lab, right? So when you're all done with your work inside of Visual Studio, make sure that you close the solution, right? I can't do a demonstration of uploading it, unfortunately, because I'm not in the student view. I mean, I suppose I can go into the student view, right? I can do this, right? And then with the lab, right? Just drag your files here, basically. So if you got a Word file, drag it in there. You got the CS file, drag it in there, hit submit, and you're all set.
So do you only want like one or the other, like the Word document or the program?
I would like both.
Okay, so we can just drag both of them in there and it'll.
Yes, please.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And Teresa, thank you for asking, because if I wasn't clear, most of the stuff that we're going to do is going to be singular files, so that will work out just fine, in terms of program code. And then, I mean, it's just basically 2 files to submit, right? And like I said, I usually look at the screenshots first to grade, something seems off or wrong, then I open up the code file and try to execute it. So that's kind of the thinking. All right, so I'm going to pause the video here for just a moment. All right, this particular assignment, which is the first regular assignment in here, is not one that I'm going to walk you completely through, but I do want to get you basically pointed in the right direction with it. So this one you will code on your own. I will demonstrate the solution for this when we reconvene next week. And basically, the program goes like this, very similar to the stuff that we just did, but let's read kind of the description to make it clear. So it says, a 16-ounce Monster Energy drink has a nutrition label stating that each can has 2 8-ounce servings. Interesting. The label also states that for each 8-ounce serving, the drink has 110 calories, 27 grams of sugar, and 80 milligrams of caffeine. Holy cow, it's better than Starbucks, right? Write a console program that takes the user, asks the user how many cans of Monster they drank today and prints the following: total calories, grams of sugar, and milligrams of caffeine. After your program runs, the console should look like the following example. So you're going to prompt the user, they're going to type in 3, and then you're going to get the calorie results back. And that should be striking to you. That's a lot of calories for a drink and a lot of caffeine for beverages too. So we're going to follow the same kind of techniques. We actually have a pretty good roadmap. The challenge here is what? First of all, when you drink a can, it contains 2 servings. So right away, you're going to like double all this stuff, right? So the other thing that's going to happen is you're going to convert the number of drinks times the doubled up can stuff, and then output it and display it on the screen. Right. So the roadmap is pretty clear. You'll do a prompt, you have a few variables, and you'll do some output. So it's not that much harder than what we just did. Right. If you guys do get stuck on it before next Tuesday's class, come to the session as early as you can and I'll help you through it. But we can also answer the questions during the beginning of the session. So we'll start the session basically by reviewing this, and then we'll move into module 2. Right. So I'm going to end this recording here. The other